Item 3, proposed Carlsbad Municipal Code update relating to the Traffic Safety Commission.
There is no PowerPoint presentation, and I'm going to briefly read an introduction and then leave it out for discussion. For several people will be making comments on those. This is intended for provide feedback to staff on proposed Carlsbad Municipal Code amendment relating to the Traffic Safety Commission's roles and duties. As a quick background, at the annual goal setting back in March of 2018, City Council directed staff to change the name and amend the duties of the Public Safety Commission, Traffic Safety Commission, to better align with the implementation of the general plan mobility element. The proposed amendment adjusts all references to the TSC, update the duties of the Traffic Safety Commission related to multimodal transportation system, and remove sections from the Chapter 2.28 of the Carlsbad Municipal Code to eliminate redundancy with Chapter 2.15, which relates to all boards and commissions. The proposed amendment expands the duties of the TSC to be involved in all mobility issues and not just automobile traffic. For the sake of discussion, again, there was a direction and a goal settings workshop by the City Council on March 20th, 2018. City Council approved resolution to establishing on April 2018, establishing the City Council goals that include the following: to have by April 2019 amend the duties of the Traffic Safety Commission to include advising the City Council on matters related to implementation of the general plan mobility element. And based on the suggestions from the current TSC commissioners relating to potential Carlsbad Municipal Code amendment, staff is bringing this proposal forward for discussion and feedback from the TSC. You will see exhibits 1 and 2 in the back in your packet. And before we go to the discussions, I would like to ask Amanda Guy to advise us a little bit more about this, and so we can not waste a lot of your time and get to the point as quickly as possible.
Sounds good. So as part of your packet, as Masood said, there's 2 exhibits. There's a proposal that staff prepared that is similar to a version I believe you've seen before. There's also a version that Commissioner Leakey prepared. That's exhibit 2. I'm also going to hand down the line. It's a clean version of staff's version. So the red line can be a little confusing to read. So just for ease of everyone's reference, you can take a look at that. I also have additional hard copies for members of the public if anyone wants one. So what the next step will be coming out of this item is, for purposes of the Brown Act, we can act on items that have been agendized and posted with the agenda. If there are substantial edits to either version, Exhibit 1 or Exhibit 2, we can take in that feedback and return at a future meeting with a new version for a majority motion from the Commission. But we won't be able to forward to Council tonight a version that is substantially different from Exhibits 1 or 2. So I just want to make sure that's clear. That said, if the Commission wants to go in a different direction, we can take that feedback and make edits along those lines. Staff, depending on the version that the Commission ultimately wants to forward, staff may end up proposing 2 versions, one that is staff's proposal and one that would be the TSC's proposal, if there are significant policy issues from staff's perspective with the one that TSC forwards. With that, I'll turn it back to Ms.
Okay, thank you. And because of there were language about the role of other divisions or planning commissions or departments that the city is involved, we had asked a representative from the Community and Economic Development to make some comments, and we have Ms. Debbie Fountain, the Director of the Community and Economic Development. She can join me and add a little bit more to as a background information.
Good evening. I was asked to talk about whether or not there were any concerns about possibly adding the TSC to the process for reviewing development applications, and whether they can make recommendations to the Planning Commission, whether your commission can make recommendations to the Planning Commission or City Council. And so our staff had taken a look at that. We were trying to figure out the pros and cons to doing that, if there was a way to incorporate the TSC into that process or not, and not get us into trouble with the Permit Streamlining Act or other types of state statutes that might cause us any concern from a timing standpoint. So our general consensus is that it would be very difficult and problematic to include the Traffic Safety Commission in the process of reviewing and approving development applications, but where we thought there could be substantial assistance provided from the Traffic Safety Commission is some of those initial policies and development standards and others that could be applied to the development application review process. One of the reasons that it's problematic to add any additional review to the process is the timelines that we have under the Permit Streamlining Act, which basically says once we deem an application complete, we only have about 180 days to process them for final approval. There are exceptions to that depending on what type of environmental review is required, or if there's legislative actions, there's different types of requirements. So that's sort of the general guideline. We're already struggling right now to meet those timelines in terms of process that we need to go through. So it would be difficult to add additional steps to that. Also, to probably complicate it a little bit further, is the state is really stepping up their requirements for approving residential projects, getting as close to making some of them permitted by right and not to have to go through much of a review process. We actually had an unsolicited call from the State Department of Housing and Community Development last week when the council was considering a moratorium in the Village area, and it became very evident that the Department of Housing and Community Development is watching very closely to what the cities are doing and making sure that they're complying with their housing elements in terms of approval of projects that are part of the site inventory, and also looking at sort of fair housing requirements, which says you have to remove impediments to approving residential. So it starts to get complicated very quickly with all these other agencies looking in on what we're doing. But one of the things that we thought would be really helpful from the Transportation or from the Traffic Safety Commission, is those types of things that kind of set up those objective standards in terms of what we apply to projects. So some of the examples we were thinking about was having the TSC much more involved in like policy development related to like traffic analysis, transportation demand management, general plan policies, engineering standards related to traffic analysis, and policies. And we were also thinking that it would be helpful to have the TSC recommend to City Council on actions related to like the growth management, traffic, facilities analysis, and actions that might be taken if there's any deficiencies that are identified. So these may all be future things that you would look at, but we also thought that it would be helpful in the review of EIR, so environmental impact reports. We have much more time built into the system to review EIRs, and so that there might be some role from the TSC in traffic analysis and a recommended mitigation plan for projects that do have an EIR that's required. And also possibly include feedback on the traffic impact analysis guidelines that land development engineering is currently applying to development projects, but those guidelines we feel will need to be revised in the future, so we could bring that back to the TSC or Mobility Commission, whatever the ultimate title is for your commission, and also looking at mobility element policies or climate action plans. So we think there's a role in there. And I know that's not entirely what all you're going to be working on tonight, because it looks like you're primarily focused on your ordinance. But when you start to talk about your work plan, maybe there's some role in that. I just wanted to share the concern that staff had about adding anything to the process on the development application review process specifically.
That's all I have.
We have questions. Commissioner Linky?
Yes. So I guess my first question is, does staff have any feedback on my version as far as any problems with it specifically, what compared to staff's version?
Well, I think it goes back to Amanda's comments earlier. And she can elaborate more better than I can, or more eloquently. Those are the feedbacks that we have gotten from the land development as well as city attorney's office.
So for the presentation that was just given, that was all perfect. That's exactly. So I included Planning Commission in mine as an additional body in addition to the City Council, and everything that you just said were exactly the types of things that could go into our work plan to help the Planning Commission as well as the City Council. So that's all fine. So apart from the inclusion of the Planning Commission, which I think seems appropriate based on what we just heard, is there anything else that is a problem?
So the language that is currently in Exhibit 2 is very broad. So it may be your intent to not include the projects that Debbie has concerns about, the development project traffic analyses that would ultimately be approved by Planning Commission. The language you have right now is shall have the duty to provide a forum for community input and to review and provide recommendations to the City Council and Planning Commission on all mobility related matters. So it's broad enough that it would arguably include the items of concern. So I think to comport with staff's feedback, if the commission wants to accommodate that, there would need to be edits made to the Exhibit 2 proposal.
Can we just remove the word all, just leave it as matters, and then it's still at the discretion of staff?
So the language in here, you removed the language referred to it, so that no longer is in as a qualifier. So right now it would be any matters that fall within the description. So you need to make further edits to circumscribe it.
Okay, so staff's version doesn't include anything that was just described. The only change from 3 months ago is the name. I'm fine with that new proposal.
So would you be okay with staff including something in their version that based on what the presentation was given? Because to me it seems pretty similar, just that planning part.
So when we 3 months ago saw this version, which hasn't changed, we wrote a protest letter because we had several concerns, and there were basically two categories. One was the referred to it language, and we have several examples of items that were not referred to us, and there's multiple new items that haven't been referred to us. So I'm aware that there are the traffic counts that have been done for the traffic monitoring program, which is a central part of the mobility element. Those are being presented to the City Council on July 9th and 16th. So this is just yet another example of one of the most important, and like the transportation demand management, one of the most important things that we would do as part of the mobility element, despite the fact that we had a presentation last month on level of service. Those items are not going through us first. It's already 6 months late for them presented to the council. and they still don't have time to present it to us first. So my concern is with that referred to language. I think it'd be nice if we could collaborate with staff to come up with some compromise that we won't be bypassed because they have the word referred to it in the preamble to our duties, because they're using that power to continually bypass us on the most important items.
Is there a way legally to do that?
So one suggestion I have is the work plan that needs to be developed. To me, the specific items that you want to come here and have staff bring forward are probably more appropriate for inclusion in the work plan versus specifically calling it out in the ordinance, which you'd want to have flexibility in your ordinance without it being too broad. So I don't know if staff can provide feedback on the issues that Debbie was bringing up of whether or not, you envision those items potentially being part of the work plan, because that's not being considered tonight. We can't go into depth on that issue, but I can understand why you'd want some assurances, what might be included in the work plan, because this will be the first step that has to occur before that comes back.
I think staff, we are open to discussion to elaborate more, because there was some unclear language or too broad of a language or shall statements that there were some discomfort with it from my predecessors and myself. That's why we wanted to make sure it's a review authority, not an oversight authority.
So, and I don't know, maybe, I'm looking over a pause maybe for feedback. So I think what I'm suggesting is and I don't know if you'd be able to speak to it at this meeting or if anyone from Public Works could speak to it here, but I think what would be helpful is if the commission could hear from Public Works staff on whether the items that Debbie was describing earlier, it sounded like there's an interest in those items, by the commission to review those, if those could be included, or if Public Works staff is in favor of including those in the work plan.
And what Commissioner Linky is referring to is not necessarily just the planning items. In the past, we were bypassed for traffic or traffic safety related items or mobility related items. So it's not necessarily just that. We just want to make sure that everything that we are here to advise the council on, that they get a chance to review.
And just a comment, I think that referred to a comment is there, and that's what caused most of the problems. We're not going to refer to the Traffic Safety Commission, so we don't have to talk to them. And it just continued to skate for about a year. It was pretty bad. They were canceling meeting after meeting, going, hey, we got nothing to refer to you, so we're not going to do it.
They suggested canceling this meeting last month because they didn't want to talk about it.
It was a holiday.
There was no suggestion to that
That's a
effect.
different.
Yeah.
When we went through last year. So anyway, that's over to you. The refer to part really is a key phrase in this whole evaluation. Sorry.
That's okay. Paz Gomez, Deputy City Manager for Public Works. So, and I have attended some of the meetings here in which those items were brought up. And I think, stepping back and really taking a look at where we're at from what City Council wanted us to do, which is to change the ordinance, to expand it so that mobility is included. We are still discussing the proposed ordinance because the previous direction was, hey, let's go ahead and work on a draft work plan and then draft an ordinance. And as you may recall, that was the previous direction. And we said, no, we're trying to get to April of 2019 and meet the council goal. And so we said, let's move this forward, and tried in April to say, no, here's the ordinance. And then there was pushback again at that time, as you may recall. We were targeting April 23rd as the council meeting to be able to meet that council goal. Brought it back and said, let's have the discussion. We heard the commissioners loud and clear. You want it to be more interactive, not directive from staff. And let's figure out what it is that we're trying to do. In an earlier version of meeting, as I recall, I believe it was in March, was when Unfortunately, Marshall and I were not able to make it. That was the day of our budget workshop, as you may recall, March 4th. And so we came over here I came over here and then left right after that. But we received some of the input that, or all of the input that the commissioners had said, and this is what we want. And it was definitely more encompassing, and it was along the lines of directing staff to do things. As I recall, one off the top of my head was to develop the coastal corridor master plan, and I'm just pulling that off as one of the ones that that caught my attention. And so, if that is a work plan goal, maybe rewording things would make a difference, and that was what we were discussing with regards from a staff perspective. And so many more discussions continued, and we had discussions on work plan first, ordinance first, right? Which comes first, the chicken or the egg? And so our direction is we're going to do the draft ordinance first. And so that's why we have this discussion here, and then the work plan will move forward. Now, to the question that was brought up, which is CED, Debbie Fountain brought up that there are some things that could be considered that would, what we feel would be in line with what you all have in mind with regards to influencing some of the things that are being presented at Planning Commission. We are concerned, think that the timeline is problematic. However, there are ways to be able to, I think, attain some of those goals. That's in the work plan process. And so I don't know if what you're hoping to get is, yes, we will keep an open mind, see about integrating that as the work plan is developed. And that is something that that we have discussed with CED. And so, yes, we are open to having that discussion to make sure that things get integrated. At the end of the day, it is really City Council's direction. So we go on, make presentations, just like we would for the draft ordinance, and what City Council wishes to approve with regards to the level of authority and the expectations from the commission, we will abide by. So I guess that's pretty much it in a nutshell.
I don't want to get too sidetracked on the whole planning commission thing. That I think that's an important thing we could add, and perhaps you guys can, if you're in agreement, you could just add to your, if we end up going with your version, just say city council and plan, you just add and planning commission.
So,
Yours, and as long as you have the referred to it language, then you have the power to decide if it's development projects, which we don't necessarily need to review. My other set, so the referred to it language is one issue, the planning commission is another issue, but the third issue is the structure of those sections, A, B, and C. And to me, a collaboration is that you would consider changing things, but the version is exactly the same as it was 3 months ago. And if you look at that, it doesn't make any sense to me. Section A is about reviewing staff studies and reports. Section B is about providing a public forum, and Section C is reviewing city codes and plans. But the target, what I'm calling the targets of each of those sections are different. So, first of all, transit is never mentioned in any of them, even though that's one of the central parts of the mobility element. Section A refers to pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicle modes of travel. So those three modes of travel, just not transit for some reason. Section B refers to pedestrians, bicycles, vehicles, and other modes of travel. I don't know if that includes transit or not. And the third one includes pedestrians, bicycles, and vehicle modes of travel. Again, no transit, but then it adds parking and school safety. So if you look at Section B, provide a public forum, does that mean that legally people are not allowed to discuss parking issues or school safety as part of the public forum because those targets are not in paragraph B? And why is the language so awkward?
Well, I can work on those to make it consistent with the city attorney's office advisement, but.
Sure, so in terms of the history on these code updates, when we initially amended the code it was limited to the council direction. So a lot of the language that you're noting as being awkward is historical language in this chapter. So it can be amended and made consistent in each section, but it is language that's existed in this chapter for some time. So that's where it came from. Other than the other language in paragraph B, the other language was existing. The transit mode can certainly be added in the paragraphs, and the school and parking safety language, that was historical language, that if there's direction to remove it or make it consistent through all of the paragraphs, it can be. So,
I'm just frustrated because those exact topics were brought up 3 months ago in writing in a letter, and nothing's been changed, and we're just spinning our wheels on this. Wholesale changes have been made to the, it's like, this is historical language, but you're striking huge paragraphs. Entire new sections of the code have been rewritten for the boards and commissions. I don't understand why these 3 lettered paragraphs have to rely so much on historical, like, we're making wholesale changes here. That's why I think my version is much simpler and preferred. It's not restricting. And I also, so my last concern on that is I don't know what's the difference between a study, a report, codes and plans, and why are those different? And if we have other documents, like you could call something a guideline or a table or a handbook or a method or a program or a tool or a worksheet or some other document that's brought up, what I don't want to happen is that someone says, well, we've developed this handbook, but it doesn't fit into the category of a study, a report, a code, or a plan, so we don't think you should review it. So mine is, yes, it's more general and broad, but I don't quite understand how this is breaking down and why we can't change this part of it.
So I was not involved in the prior meeting, so I apologize if we're going over, old ground. So apologies there. I don't have a letter from the commission as well, so I'm working from this draft. I think the language with reference to studies and reports, codes and plans is quite broad. So I think if it's identified in your work plan, I think that would be an umbrella that covers, I would imagine, virtually anything you wanted to consider that's related to mobility issues. So and I don't know if your comments are reflected by the other commissioners, but to the extent there are, changes can be made to accommodate that feedback in this version. Transit could be added to paragraphs A through C. We could strike the words "and other" from paragraph B. And planning commission could be added to paragraph A.
And parking and traffic and school traffic safety.
So what would you want to do with that? Make it consistent in all the paragraphs or strike it?
You could end each paragraph where it says, I forget what it says exactly, but related to bicycles, pedestrians, vehicle modes of travel,
And transit.
and transit modes of travel, and parking, and school traffic safety. So I agree with all those. It just seems silly to write that huge phrase 3 different times in 3 different separate paragraphs. But that's okay with me.
Yeah, I think you could probably get it down potentially to 2 paragraphs where you combine the studies, reports, codes, and plans. The community input is, I think, a separate piece to it.
Yeah.
So, I mean, that's something our office can work on just in terms of the formatting, whether it makes sense for it to be 2 paragraphs or 3 still. But we can make it consistent with respect to the modes of travel, to reflect the 4 types, to include the parking and school safety, and strike the other modes, and add planning commission. So I think that would, but we would need a motion and a second on that.
And we're gonna strike out refer to, is that what we said?
So I didn't say that, because I do think that's still important, but I think it comes down to the work plan, really. So I think that's where, to the extent there are issues with specific items coming to the commission, I would recommend working that out in the work plan, because I do think the issues that are involved in having the open-ended language in the other proposal are much more significant. They will create a lot of issues for staff on development proposals, and I think in the interest of moving this forward, to rework that to a point where staff would be comfortable with it, it would take much more time than moving forward on this and developing an adequate work plan that is acceptable to the commission.
I do want to point out, though, that when I read the municipal code, none of the other commissions or boards, not one of them in the municipal code has that language in there. It's far more broad than that. It doesn't say refer to it. We are unique and we're the only commission that has that. I also want to say that this has been on the record for 3 months. I emailed staff liaison last week as soon as I got the staff report, and he said he would forward this information to you on exactly these issues. So I just wish we didn't have to keep spinning our wheels, and now we'll go another month before we can approve language, and then it'll probably be another month or 2 months before it goes to the city council, and then it'll take another month or so because they have to do multiple readings because it's an ordinance. And in here it says they're not gonna start working on our work plan until after it's officially adopted by the city council, which could be December. So our 2019 work plan, we're not even gonna start working on it probably until 2020. So if there's any way we could like speed this up, we've gone back and forth between work plan and code, and it's just a way to slow walk everything. We need to speed this up.
That is not the intent of staff to slow things down. And so I think, as Amanda had mentioned earlier, and please do correct me if I misspeak, is that if it isn't substantial with regards to the changes to what staff has proposed, if we were going to inserting, making sure that transit is included, adding parking, things along those lines, as you had proposed, and if it's voted on, and we can insert that information and it passes. I will tell you, I'll be completely honest. Our preference as staff is to go to City Council and say, this is what TSC supports and has approved, and staff is on board. I would rather present something where it's not two different versions. Well, this is staff version and this is TSC. I want it to be one that says we all agree that this is what we would like to move forward with. We are also looking at trying to get this on board, and it does take time to tee things up with regards to putting it in front of City Council. And I believe we are targeting August 20th, I believe, to try to get the introduction of the ordinance for this commission for the change. And it takes time, and it is 2 readings. However, if it's presented on August 20th, the second reading could be August 27th. Is that correct? Or would it have to be at 30?
It's 2 weeks. For this
2 weeks, okay. So September, whatever the first September meeting is in council. So that's what our intent is and what we would like to move forward with. But if it's a substantial change from what staff has presented, then as Amanda had mentioned earlier, then we would have to go back and take a look at it and then come back and present, and just like what you had said, would delay the process.
Well, let me see if I can get us there. I think A, B, and C, and I have to turn back to Commissioner Linke, but what you said about the restructure and the move around, you seem pretty comfortable with A, B, and C, the way you want to rewrite it into A and B, or however it is. I think the referred to part is what's been getting us. But if I read that first line, it shall be the duty of the Traffic and Mobility Commission to study. Okay, it doesn't say approve or anything else like that. All matters concerning mobility and traffic. If we get rid of the referred to portion, okay, that doesn't say that TSC or TMC now, or whatever it is, now is in a authority position on that. That comes down in the A, B's, and C's, and also in the work plan.
Right.
So if it's just a study matter, if we can remove that referred to, which is a big bugaboo for a bunch of us here, that's a technical term. For engineers would understand that, but so, then I think we're pretty much there.
I would like to know how come the other commissions don't have this referred to language, if anybody knows.
I couldn't speak to that tonight. I haven't reviewed every chapter with respect to the boards and commissions. Because I haven't reviewed them, I don't know whether or not the sections are tighter, for lack of a better description, in terms of the purview of those boards and commissions. I could see if you delineated in A, B, and C more of the very specific items that would be reviewed, it wouldn't matter if you had the referred to it language. I think the concern is deleting that language and then having broad categories if there would be any argument that it's compulsory that it come here. So the concern being with the development projects. So what I'm doing right now as you're speaking is taking a look at the language and trying to think through whether it would be compulsory. Because that's the concern of whether in the other proposal, the language shall have the duty. You know, that's mandating that it come here. So what I would suggest is maybe take a short recess. So I can just take, 5 minutes maybe.
Well, let me just throw one other thing out there. It doesn't say who refers it. So he could refer it, somebody in the audience that during a general deal could refer it. It doesn't say a staff referral. So the referred by language already is relatively nebulous. But you could use it as an excuse, staff could use it as an excuse to say, we're not bringing the Melrose PAR restriping because we're not referring it to you, which we'll get to later.
Yeah, even though it's passive voice, I think given the nature of who sets the agenda and that council will be the other body that could refer items to the TSC and historical context, it would be staff and council, would be how we interpret it.
And I want to raise one more hypothetical along those lines. This is my main concern is that we develop a work plan, and I am concerned that staff will very narrowly define what a work plan is. But beyond that, let's say we have a good work plan, we're all satisfied with it, but then a big issue comes up that we didn't anticipate a year in advance in our work plan that's related to traffic. And it's not in our work plan, and they don't have to refer it to us, so they just bypass it. So that's sort of where I am concerned.
So I think that concern can be dealt with in chapter 2.15, so the general chapter with respect to boards and commissions. It speaks to the boards and commissions seeking to amend its work plan prior to the annual approval date. And so there can be a vote to submit the amendment to the city council for approval at a later point in time. You can also request a joint meeting if the board or commission deems it necessary to discuss the proposed amendments.
But it's too late by then. So I see the council agenda on Friday, and it has a traffic item, and it's dealt with by the city council. And then at my next meeting, I can say, well, we got bypassed again, and we can change our work plan, but it's too late.
And one thing that the commission can do is, I think it sounds like here there needs to be perhaps better collaboration between the commission and staff, and to make sure that items come forward if they're foreseeable. Sometimes there will be items that are last minute and that can't be helped, but to the extent that they are foreseeable and can be in the annual work plan or something that is projected enough so they can be added or they can come at staff's discretion. I think that from what I'm hearing, it sounds like that's something that can be certainly improved. So I hear your concern, and all I can say is going forward, that's something that we can all keep in mind and work to.
We thought that after the TDM ordinance, but now with the growth management program, traffic monitoring report apparently going to council without going through us now, one of the most important things, how can we trust staff to bring items to us? I don't know.
So I think that's the crux of what I'm hearing from across the board from the commissioners, is there is a lack of trust of staff across the board, or at least certainly directly from your voice. One of the things that I think is really important is for us to build that relationship. We can talk about, staff didn't bring this, staff didn't bring that. We as staff are just that. We are staff, and we go and report to the city manager, and who, of course, reports to the city council for policy direction. So one of the things that we are working on, and certainly, and I know that our new transportation director, Sean, feels the same way, is that we do need to get to a better understanding on what it is that is the work plan for the TSC. Now, I'm relatively new, but my understanding is that is relatively new for all of the commissions, right? We've reached out to our fellow commissions to say, how are you doing? Have you facilitated? Have you developed your work plan? And everybody's coming up a little bit short. Maybe one has already, I think it was the senior commission, has had a facilitated, hey, what do you want? But as far as I know, none of the commissions, to date, have a work plan that has been presented and approved by City Council. So this is something new that we're working with. Now, my understanding, and I haven't been here for years, and I'm going by what Chuck has said, well, we've had council meetings and things along those lines. So those were based on the previous regime and what had occurred before. So I will have to defer to what happened in the past. All I'm saying is that now it is, I'm the deputy city manager, so this is under my responsibility. We have a new city manager, Scott Chadwick, who's very much interested in how we interface and work with the commission, and our intent is to be collaborative. And we have a brand new transportation director who'll be working alongside of you. That is what we want to do. So the work plan that we're working with as a draft work plan isn't staff is going to jam this down your throat. That's not the intent. It is a collaborative way of what would you like to put in it, and what does City Council want for levels of authority. Back to, I remembered the question with regards to Terramar and why didn't it go in front of them. I do recall that was something that City Council wanted to present to them. The question on the TDM, well, why didn't it come? Right now, since we haven't approved this ordinance, mobility is not part of the TSC commission at the moment. That was the direction that was given by council to present the draft ordinance by April of 2019. And I'm the first to tell you we did not meet that goal, but it has not been done yet. And until we get this ordinance finalized to show that mobility should come before this commission, it is not in the TSC authority that has been vested by City Council. That's where they want to go, that's where we'd like it to be, but at the moment it's not. And there was also the settlement that required that it be presented and passed by Council by March of 2019. So the timeline was something that we had to meet from a legal perspective. So there are histories. You mentioned July 1st of the staff trying to, oh yeah, we're trying to cancel. We were not trying to cancel the meeting tonight. It was just that my understanding is from the past, when it is during a holiday week, it's taken into consideration as that's something that the commission wishes to do. It is the commission's desire. If you are open to saying, hey, yeah, we all, half of us will be gone and we won't be here for this meeting because we're celebrating in Washington, D.C., then we would have said, okay, then this meeting will be canceled. The fact is, almost all of you are here, which is why staff is here and why we're holding this meeting. So we want it to be collaborative. We want this to be something that we're moving forward. We're going to be working on changing the ordinance, and we are the only commission that had a mandated change with regards to the duties of a commission from the goal setting. So that is different. The other commissions are not required to do that from the goal setting. So that's what so that's what we're trying to do in getting this ordinance. But all of us are supposed to be developing a work plan. So we're all working towards that goal as well.
And that mandate came a year and a half ago. So you just want to speed things up. The TDM ordinance was on our agenda in December. I wasn't on the commission then, but it was on the December 2018 agenda. You mentioned a March deadline. Well, it apparently got canceled at the last minute for unknown reasons. So
it was not ready. So that was the
this
reason.
is one of the problems is that run the clock out so that, oh, there's no time to present things to us and.
Commissioner Linke, with all due respect, I've had an opportunity to work with the city staff for the last 10 months now. And I can promise you that city staff is not trying to circumvent the system, to make it so that, oh, we're going to wait until the 11th hour so that the commission can't vote on it. That is not the intent. City staff really want to do a good job. I can tell you that a lot of the folks here, I will speak on their behalf that they want to do the right thing. I can also tell you that there has been a lot of workload that has been added on staff, and that was the reason, and I had heard that historically we have only added as a city 1 or 2 at the most 9 staff for a long, long time. And historically, this past fiscal year, this past budget, added 41 positions, which is remarkable, some of which is going to benefit Public Works. So the point is, I made a presentation here to City Council on May 14th about staff resource capacity, and I was telling them, we can't get to these projects. It might have been appropriated 2 or 3 years ago. We can't get there because we don't have the staff. So it's not that staff is saying, oh, well, it's a traffic safety commission, so we're not going to do anything for them, or we're going to keep things away from them. And I want to dispel that notion, because that is not what city staff is trying to do. We're all trying to do a good job to help you make the decisions and to move things forward, but it has to be based on what the ordinance tells us is the role, the advisory role of the TSC, and what should be here and presented to City Council. So that's what we're trying to get clarified, the direction that they gave. Yes, it's not as quick as we would like it to be. On the other hand, we're also supposed to have had a work plan, and none of the commissions have had a work plan to date. So we're working through that. I think we're a step closer. I think we're almost there with regards to what we were talking about on the ordinance. So hopefully we'll get to the finish line before the end of this evening.
So,
Okay, apologies. So I was able to take a look at one of the ordinances online, and Commissioner Lickey is correct that it doesn't look like the referred to language is elsewhere. And I think that with the current language in paragraphs A through C, it wouldn't be construed as a mandatory, agendized item to come here, but would give you the flexibility to have those items come here. I'm going to pass, I don't know if we have the ability to make copies of this on the fly.
I can try.
Okay. I suggest taking a recess so we can make copies to distribute to the commissioners. So I interlineated the changes that we discussed, but I think it would be best to have all of these changes in front of each of you so you can take a hard look before you would consider making a motion on them.
Commissioners, great. Take a break? Or can we continue with our discussion while you?
She can either make the copies and continue discussing, or you can take a recess.
So we are not on the staff side, so we don't know their intention. And I personally, and I believe that we all feel the same. We can only tell you what we've been experiencing for the past year. And some are new commissioners, but they're very, very educated on the subject. And some of us been here longer. And it just felt to us, it feels that for the past year, we did get bypassed many times on traffic related, not necessarily mobility. So even if the intent was not there, many times, it's not what you say, it's how you say it. The same thing with the actions, and it felt that month after month it's been repeating. We had this discussion with Marshall. I know he's not here anymore, but we talked about how do we trust that it's not going to happen, that it's going to come here next, or whatever the issue was. And it happened again. So it's very hard. Trust is very hard to gain, and it's very easy to lose.
Understand.
So, right now, at this point, we are very hesitant to approve. I would love to just trust, because we all, I mean, I totally understand where the staff comes from. And I know, and I try to mediate, to take in consideration all the political, consequences, you know, like we talked about the level of service, last month, and so on. But it's very hard to just let this go out of our hands, and it's not about a personal thing. Because I don't think any of us care for staff to come to us personally as a power thing. Some of us are not gonna be here next year. We just wanna make sure that as a city, we are as transparent as possible when it comes to traffic, especially if this is one of the main complaints that we get from our residents in the city. Everything is perfect, just the traffic is the problem. So we can't keep building like this without taking that in consideration. We have to work together as a team. And we've been trying to do that, and we wrote a letter to the council. You're not aware of it. We pulled it back because staff promised that it's gonna happen. And we're 3 months later, and we're still going back and forth about how can we get to, we just wanna make sure that we are doing our duty, and our duty from what the council is requesting us or requiring of us is to advise on traffic and mobility issues. We're not making any decisions, we're advising, but we want to get that chance of advising on traffic-related, transportation-related, and mobility. And whatever happens after that, staff takes it to council doesn't like it. I don't even know if they take in consideration our advice or not, but at least we did our duty. And we offered the public forum for everybody to have that chance of talking about these issues. So I think that's where we're coming. Commissioner Linke has been in it for many years, and I can feel his frustration. We're getting more frustrated here because every month he feels the same thing. So we're hoping that we can get to something that we can move on, because I personally, I'm getting tired of this.
And I think the work plan will help us, because it will define and hold the staff accountable on what is it that you are interested in with regards to the next year or even in the out years of what kinds of things. And I'll be honest, I asked the question of what are the things, because traffic is so broad, right? You either speed it up or you slow it down, and pretty much is it the private, is it the CIPs, and so, you know, traffic is involved in everything. So does that mean every single CIP project that we have before we present it to council has to go through the TSC? I know that there's a laundry list of things that go in front of, you know, we have our planning calendar on which ones we're teeing up and preparing for council. And I can tell you that the traffic touches all of them in some way, shape, or form. We're getting ready to build the Orion Center, which is our maintenance and operations facility. It's going to be located over there at the Safety Center complex. Is that going to involve traffic? Perhaps, because now the staff that were going over to CMWD, that were coming over to Oak or going to the parks maintenance, they will now be going over there. Should that CIP project, which is a $40 million project, come before the TSC? So those are the kinds of things that are across the board, whether it's capital improvement project or what we just talked about with regards to the private projects. Are those the ones, the developers, are those the ones that now we have to, if it goes before the Planning Commission, I would say, oh, anything, because it has chicanes in that Upper Bressie project. So now do we have to present it in front of the TSC before it goes to the Planning Commission? And those are the items, as Debbie had mentioned earlier.
If it does benefit the council and it benefits the city, then it should, that's how I see it. I mean, we should present it to whoever. If it benefits the council and we are a little bit more specialized, I mean, the council sees so many projects, right?
Exactly.
Everything. And that's why we have these commissions under to be a little bit more specialized. And we're not experts, but we're just a little bit more focused, right? So if those projects are, if coming to us and our advice to them, it would help them to make a more educated decision, I believe it should come. We can leave it to the council to what they want to see.
And that's exactly where it is. I think we are evolving, or had evolved in the last year with City Council's direction with expanding the scope to include mobility. So that's certainly a step in the right direction, and we needed to get the ordinance approved to do that. And then the work plan then flows of what are the kinds of things that should be coming before the TMC or TSC or whatever it ends up being, right? And so mapping that out and looking forward to it, I think will help us with regards to holding staff accountable and then having the commission understand better what it is that's in your bailiwick, if you will. And in that way, if the Orion Center is presented to City Council and it didn't come to the TSC or TMC first, then that's okay, because everybody understood that, no, that's actually a facility, it's all fine, it's all good in that direction, instead of a feeling of, oh, you bypassed us yet again, and we don't want to do that.
Yeah, it felt to us that the staff was kind of coming between us and the council.
Yeah.
Like, we had no direct communication to the council. So that's why we just want to make sure that our voices are heard and the council takes not in consideration, but maybe they just read this and they don't even, they're not aware of what's happening right now with us.
Yeah, so I think I can tell you that City Council is aware of the concerns with regards, and City Council is aware that we've missed their goal of April of 2019, and they're also aware that we are teeing it up for August 20th. So Council has the information with regards to our planning calendar and when we're planning on teeing things up. So they are aware. And when staff made presentation of the items, for example, with regards to Tamarack and Valley, it's part of the staff presentation that it came before the TSC. So those items are included in the staff reports.
Okay, any other comments?
Yeah, just commenting on the cancellations, just to put it in perspective to you, it had nothing to do with there, but last year we started canceling almost every month. I know there were things on the agenda, and then the meeting got canceled, and so we had things on the agenda, and the comment was, well, they don't really need to see that, so we don't really need to have a meeting. And we were working on our third cancellation in a row when the city council changed the rules, or something changed the rules and said, you can only cancel a meeting, either the
Oh, no,
chair.
it's been there, I just found it. So we used to get just email from the staff saying we're gonna cancel the meeting. And none of us knew, what do you mean canceling the meeting? None of us discussed anything about it.
Yeah.
And in the rule, it says that by a majority vote.
Majority vote.
So I promise you that won't happen.
And as Mona and I and some of the other ones that were here last year, we discussed at the meeting, one of our big deals is it's the public forum for traffic. And as we said, traffic is the biggest issue in the city. So we may not have a lot of people here that often, but we might if we didn't cancel the meeting every other month. So we haven't canceled a meeting since that time that we put that rule in place and said, even if there's no staff presentation, we're going to have a 15-minute meeting to allow the public to be able to talk.
Sure.
So, and we've done that. That's why it's July 1st. Okay, that's all right. We're going to have
I
a
was
meeting.
scared to take vacations on the first Monday of the month.
So anyway, I just wanted
Okay,
to clarify that.
Okay, thank you.
Okay,
Anyway, let's.
any other comments before we go to the proposal?
Yes.
Commissioner Fowler.
So, I'm sorry, I didn't get your name.
I'm sorry, Paz Gomez.
Paz Gomez.
Yes, sir.
So I want to thank you for your comments. And I think you came with a certain role that we don't see very much, which is upper management. And a manager who is defending staff. And so I think that's one of the communication issues that I think we get is that the staff who comes before us have a very technical orientation and has to answer specific questions that we may have and present. And so it does seem like, it's like you know that, oh God, this is 6:30 and this meeting's going longer. And you kind of feel sorry for them because, they put in a full day and all of that kind of thing. And so, but and so, you know, there is sort of this communication gulf, I think. I think we're also aware that politics in Carlsbad is changing. And I don't think that 5 years ago, there would be as many activists, what I would call activist commission members, who would do independent research and assert their own independent expertise on matters. And the research may be excellent and the expertise may be top-notch, but it's not the model that everybody's used to. And I don't think it's going to go away. And so now there's another element that, and I'm skeptical of that as part of a process of having two different streams of truth, so to speak. And that it concerns me a lot. And I also think one of the things that we need to think of as commissioners is to support staff. And so, and they need to support us, and we need to get to that place, and we're clearly not there. But I think you coming and defending staff or explaining things and so forth, I think is a real step forward for us. And it's easier for us to kind of complain to you than the people who are actually doing the work. And you've been very nice to listen to our frustrations and that. And so maybe we can build into our processes this kind of dialogue. Because I think we both sides make very important points, but I just go back that we are here because people ask us to be here in a process in which staff brings us questions to answer. And there are many other questions about traffic that exist in Carlsbad that indeed we don't see, and we say, why is that? And and things like that. So I would love to see us all unified in our opinions, and that's probably will never happen, except we can come to accommodation and a consensus as to the right way moving forward. So I'm sort of in the middle of this, but I would love to see us be closer to staff and respect each other and, be willing to do give and take. But I think your presence here is really supporting that. And so I appreciate that.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you.
Is there a motion?
Okay, finally, somebody.
I make a motion we accept it as our legal friend has written.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Discussion.
One discussion point, I think it looks good. I don't know if it would make sense to say just all modes of travel rather than list all four out. It's okay the way it is with me, but I'm thinking if someone comes with a scooter thing, the scooters aren't in there.
Where do you want the all?
Just instead of, so in each section it's now pedestrian, bicycle, vehicular, and transit modes of travel, and parking and school traffic safety, which is good. And it's, like I said, it's okay with me, but just to make sure it includes scooters and any other micro mobility or any other modes of transportation. Would it make sense to just put all modes of transportation there?
Yeah, so yeah, you could either do that or you can do including but not limited to those related. Either would serve that. So it's whether or not you want to call out specific types for reference later or whether you want it to be more open-ended.
All but not limited, because who knows, when I have flying cars.
I was just thinking.
Well,
that's why I just said all
autonomous cars soon, so I think all but not limited would be a good.
So it'll be
Middle.
either including but not limited to those related to pedestrian, bicycle, vehicular, and transit modes of travel, or as Commissioner Linke suggesting and say all modes of travel. So it's one of the two.
Either one is fine.
Yeah. Whatever.
It's not mine to decide.
What's easiest,
I like
what's easy.
I like the first one that kind of calls out a few things.
Okay,
And not for us, but more so for the public,
right.
that they look at it and they go, oh, okay, it's pedestrian or bicycle or something, I know where I'm going. I know the other one covers it just as easily, but that might not be as good for the public, so. So if we're in either, if everybody's on either, I choose that one.
I have one question though, and I know it's historical, but the term created, I would rather see it. I know it's trying to conform to the higher level for all boards and commissions, but this is truly being established, not created.
Oh, you're saying in the first, sorry, I was trying to read the first section.
And
Yeah.
2.28.10, that's just a picky thing, but
Yeah, and I don't know if that's
it goes
the
back to
commission.
historical, but, or maybe
Right,
it's a
right.
legal thing, but it's truly being established or formed, not created. It's no
Yeah,
more than created.
personally, there is no great legal significance to the is created terminology.
Yeah.
So I think that's up for debate if the commission wants to say, you know, I've seen it stated as hereby established as another alternative that I've seen.
Yeah. I like
Or is established.
established, yeah.
That make you happy?
Yes, it makes me happy.
I'd modify my motion to include changing that to established.
Thank you.
And all but not limited.
And including but not limited to those related in paragraphs A
Would
through
have
C.
been unlimited to.
Okay, for the purposes of the record, I'm gonna describe the changes that are in front of us right now, in the interlineation version that we handed out to the commissioners. So we made changes to section, this is exhibit 1 to the agenda packet. We made changes to section 2.28.010 by substituting the word created with established. We made changes to 2.28.050 by deleting the word all in the first line, deleting the words referred to it in the first line. In paragraph A, we added the words "and planning commission" following city council. We deleted the word "and" in the second line. We added the words comma, "and transit" in the third line. Going back to the second line, we also added "but not limited to" following the word "including." And we added the words "and parking and school traffic safety" at the end of paragraph A. In paragraph B, we added the words "but not limited to" following "including" in line 2. We added a comma after vehicular. We added the word "transit" after the word "and" in line 2. We deleted the word "other." And in the last line of paragraph B, at the end, we added "and parking and school traffic safety."
May I make a suggestion? In the body, the first paragraph that says, that starts with "it shall be the duty of," it, and the third line, it says make written recommendations to the city council, because I think your intent was to add "and planning commission" to that one as well.
So maker of the motion.
I'll amend my motion to add that.
I'm gonna finish paragraph C and go back up to that. So paragraph C, line 2, we added "but not limited to" after "including." We added a comma after "bicycle." We added a comma after "vehicular." We added the words "and transit" after "vehicular," comma, in the last line, paragraph C. And the last change just added was to add the words "and planning commission" in line 3 of the first paragraph in 2.28.050.
Are we good? Ready to vote? And celebrate? Who's second? Commissioner
Yeah, I think
Fowler.
that's it.
Did you like it?
I will.
There we go.
Now it's the
Please note that it passed unanimously with Commissioner Pensiero being absent. Okay, are we good?
Yes,
Happy?
thank you so much.
Thank you.
You should come more
That's a
often.
good collaboration.
So the next step, just so for everyone's information, will be, we'll create a new strikeout version reflecting these changes, new clean version, and those will be attachments to staff report that ultimately goes to council on this item.
Good, thank you.